Okay, to update you with regard to this before I go in the next direction, which I think is probably a foregone conclusion that we should at least explore this double gable end, maybe even a single gable, since that is part of it anyway. For now though, because this is what I felt ought to be tried, I finished exploring this and through the construction of the greenhouse portion to the greatest extent possible. Recall this was our foundation work done up through the knee walls, and then from the Solar Innovations website, just using some of their typical details that were fairly close to what they have bid you in a couple of these bids, I constructed some of these details. This section here though, I tried to get away from using 2x6s because I wanted to save you that 4 inches of width inside, for one thing, and for two, if we have a good alignment out here right now with what is happening on the corner boards, but if we want to make these 2x6 walls, we will lose. This will go down to 13'4", but we'll pick up A, the insulation value, and B, probably a wider sill in here, and C, probably a little better attachment. Right here is what, using their detail, this was the best I could do to come up with to keep 2x4 walls. But if we do go with 2x6 walls, that means this stone veneer portion is going to project in here further by another 2 inches. And so I think at that point, if we do that, I think then this whole wall just gets, covered with the same cultured stone that goes around here. And then all of this out here is the same except for these bits and pieces on this wall, if you go to 2x6 walls. So that's one of the decisions. And then the other details I used to construct the thing, I couldn't pick up a whole bunch from some of the photos, and there's so many different ways to do this. I'm assuming Solar Innovations will put together whatever they need to fit on our knee walls. For now though, I've shown the gutter, I've shown some of the other parts that are detailed in your estimates from them. Their estimates, at least the one I was looking at for the double-ended structure, they were using 1.5 by 2 inch by 5.5 inch beams or framework, like what was done in Warwick, New York. This, because we have so much all of these up here are 9 inches. All of these verticals are 9 inches. So what I've designed uses 2.5 by 4, which is another one of Solar Innovations frameworks to go up here. And I haven't experimented beyond that. I thought a little chunkier, but we can make that lighter. For now, the idea is to get a feel for which of these shapes is ultimately going to be explored to the construction drawing phase. And using the dimensions that Solar Innovations quote is based upon, from the ground 8 foot from here and so forth, we're a little bit higher here because of the pitch. I mentioned that in the last film. Wrong. Fake news. Their quote was actually for a very similar structure, so that was fake news. In this next section, I want to talk about the ranking of this framework, and that's one of the main decisions you have to make. I made a decision one way and ran with it for the purposes of the modeling so far, but I wanted to at least show you this, although it's really, to me, it's almost a no-brainer. Solar Innovations may have some other arrangement that works better as far as this whole framework goes. But for this section, notice this is divided into, beyond the pie parts, this is divided into either 4 or 5 spaces, like this. I don't like this one at all. It doesn't really make sense, but these are 4 foot, 4 foot, and these are like 3 foot, 3 foot, 3 foot. With this extra division here, these 4 spaces all become the same, and that actually is a better size for a door. The door can go in any of these bays then Okay, I am just consistently showing it down here. That is another thing that you can let me know on, because it would work anywhere along here. And here you see, this is what I've gone with. This is dictated, this width here is dictated by the framework up here, I assume, and their connection, what they show as a connection up here. But the rest of these are all evenly sized down through here. And then there's this one, which has about, this might only be 12 or 14 inches wide. But these are all even. This assumes that these up here would be your transoms on both sides. And continuing to build this, I pulled this rock down as I promised I would. And what, I'm not sure this should be this. This tends to get slippery. So maybe this is just another one of these big rocks that you have up on the other patio. This is how it would shape up. This is the existing ranking on that wall there. My feeling is that all of this comes off from the side of this corner board over. I think these are full 2x10s on this, so that should all be taken off, and we will start fresh and redo that in the same style and fashion, but rearranging it to suit up better with what's happening with the greenhouse. I don't know about this bottom part. I mean, for that matter, you can leave that awning over it. I'm not even sure exactly what happens under that, but this was my assumption of what was under it. I'm not sure which of these, well, as we come further along, because we have a section of roof that goes in here, I'm assuming there might be equipment in this up higher part here. And there's the little cricket roof that comes down over. And you can see it built here in the two ways. And imagine that you have equipment. We'll figure that out as we get further along. Whether those things come through like that or not would have to be decided. And then finish building this greenhouse structure. Here's how the roof comes together, and I don't know exactly. I haven't communicated with Nicholas at Solar Innovations about how this happens. So my best guess is that I don't know what they do in these situations. I'll say that much, and I haven't talked to anybody about it. My best guess, though, is that this becomes the transoms or the vents down so far, and then the rest of this happens, or a little differently than what I'm showing. I'm showing it like this. This is almost a 3/12 pitch. I'm just showing it in rubber, though. And see, I'm assuming instead of glass in these panels here, this framework happens, and I don't show it here in this modeling, but there will be a member across this wall here that these things would die down to, a steel member of the same framework from Solar Innovations. So down below, and I don't know if these panels can be available in wood grain insulated panels, for example, so that down below you just see the bottom of those instead of glass, and you don't see any of this roof framework that has to be built on top. But that's a little roof structure that gets it. Now this is all very close call, and Solar Innovations will definitely have some input on positive. As I said, though, my guess is that I don't know if this just becomes a little thing that's 27-inch long just to match the length of these transoms, or just goes away entirely. And if that goes away entirely, it brings up a situation, should all of these go away entirely and all be in some sort of panel, and maybe there's equipment up here. So as you can see, a lot to think about on that whole thing. But yeah, my guess is that Solar Innovations would have us bring this edge of this up closer to the edge of their transom, which I don't show that, it's raised up, etc. But they'll specify all that, I'm assuming, or at least help us to pull it together. And that was how it looks from the overview. And is that going to feel unbalanced inside? Now, if I was doing this, I would be I would be hard pressed on whether I want to fill this, because I don't think you're going to lose much, any light really, just reflected light. But I'd be hard pressed on whether I want to make this an infill panel. That's glass coming through the side, so you can see out there. But this could be an infill panel if those two stay glass. A lot of this comes down to solar innovations, as you can tell. More looks at this ranking through here with the even spacing, and then with that uneven spacing, where these become wider. In these here, you almost have to put the door in one of these here to make sense. And then as I said, through this whole thing, I just put the door here just to keep it back out of the way and close to everything else that's happening, and leave this open for usage. And by the way, I'll cover this right now. You might want to think about, maybe it's better, and I know this impacts a lot of what we've done so far, but maybe it's better if you step further down into this room, considering some of your other sunken rooms in the house. Maybe it feels better and more right with the rest of it if you step from the dining room down into this, more than that 1.5 inches that I was proposing, down into this 6.5 inches, and then down onto this deck the 1.5 inches, so this door comes down some. That affects a lot of things. I would say the outside of this is about proportional, so I would say really the only thing it affects is that this floor drops down and that wall becomes a little higher at this point, because I'd really, all of this stuff up here is working proportionally nice right now. However, I'm really torn. And if I was making the call, I would make you step down into, because it feels right for a greenhouse, really. So that's another critical question to satisfy. And if it doesn't go down to the floor, I mean, this is automatic. This is another way the thing just draws itself. And that would, we have to see, I guess that would happen whether the door drops down or not. We might see that in another elevation. This is just finishing out the greenhouse. This is what we're running with. All of these are evenly spaced across here except this one, because that's dictated by this, which is dictated by the width of this. When you get it this far along, it's not finished, but when you get this far along, this all looks pretty decent to me. I'm sorry to belabor this point, but here are your main vents, or frames, or whatever you want to call them, with the even spacing and the oddball spacing, which is now, should have been a done deal a while ago. And this was, once I had gotten this far along, this was just a quick spin around of the structure itself, just from a couple angles. And there are two different ways to save these photos with this automatic thing turned on like that, or turned off. And I'll show you that on another couple of photos, and you have to let me know which one is best to present, rather than saving two of these to try to get the point across. Coming back over to the north elevation and finish building it more like what Solar Innovations has quoted with the actual windows. I mean, these are fixed windows up here, but with the windows up here and grids in the glass, or on the applied to the glass actually. None of these models, at this point anyway, are showing any of the special OG type moldings outside, that any of that sort of stuff. If we reach a point where that needs to be shown, we'll show it. But otherwise, we'll let Solar Innovations drawings provide that sort of detail. We are just trying to see what is going to look best on this house. Now these you can't really tell from this one, but and these elevation views are a little deceiving because they show the glass feels solid to you, but the grills do make a difference, even though I wasn't inclined to because the house is so without them. But it is a greenhouse, and this takes away some of the apparent mass. I think from a real standpoint it won't be as critical, but this does help it, I think. And particularly you can see it from now. This is all clear glass, yes, but it's still a lot of mass, and this helps to break that all up. Now for most of these angles I don't have those upper windows, I just have that in glazing, not in actual window units. But again, from this side with the grills. And the other thing that happens here, and I should mention it so we don't miss it, is this stone is pushed, this base stone here, in addition to being pushed down, I have that, I think that should be projected maybe 1.5 inches to 2 inches from the face of this brick with some sort of a cap, and that's what you can see in this and later in some of the rendering photographs, is this cap over here dividing this off. There's not really a precedent for it. There's the stone on the face over there, but that's a different, more closed situation, and this helps this immensely, I think. And those are just the window indicators. And with the glass in this situation here dropped, just backing this out, I think, a little bit, get a feel for the size, even though it would seem like it wasn't that large, at least from this angle, which isn't a realistic angle, it's an elevation, but that shows you that. For the record, I think this is working. I'm curious to see, I think this is probably going to work better than the square end at this point, but I earlier thought this wouldn't work at all, so let's see what happens. Now, earlier you gave me the actual colors to your house. We've been working with something like this, my interpretation of what I saw out there, but this is the actual thing, and this is the values that are associated with that. And when we apply them to this, all your, what would be your dark trim, this is where we are with that. And the middle one is a similar situation. The lighter color renders that when you use the actual values from the paint manufacturer. So we have to come to some sort of a consensus on what color out there for this modeling portion feels right, most right, and what has to happen so that we are at least on the right track with that. I just lightened that up because I just couldn't, I don't see that when I'm out there. Your mileage may vary, but to me that looks a lot closer to that. So that's another thing that needs solved, because I have been showing everything in the same or similar color as the house. The estimate shows it in Hartford green, so we're going to show that at the very least. And it's very easy to apply any of these colors to the structure. In this, I go to green. You can't really tell from here, but I do. You can see it at the crest. So I have these metal things. They sent me the metal chips of most of these common colors, and I will drop them off up there today on Wednesday. So in some of the recording, or in some of the photos going forward, I've adjusted the colors as I've gone along to more accurate representations. This is from a more a place that specializes in color and paint and these finishes. And this is the actual burgundy, for example, and this is what is in the SI brochure. So that's not very reliable. I did the same thing with Hartford green. I went back and tried to adjust that and get it closer to what was real from this same source. These are a whole range of these depending upon how that impacts your cost. So, and then here's the whole series of this building from this angle here. And again, here's this exposure. Would you rather see them come over like that or like this? Because I can't do a whole bunch of different things with it. That was complete in the color that matches the house, which should be really close to their sandstone. As you see, I have the chips here. And here, watch this foundation where this really improves everything. You can see this one over here, it comes up flush. But this one over here I think should be pushed out a little bit like that. I don't think I showed in these photos going forward. This is just after this. This was a rotation after this one. And as you can see, I think it was working. I mean, I think it can work. Because you don't see it like this in real life. Here is where that, speaking of seeing it like this in real life, this is where I apply that Benjamin Moore HC85 to these dark parts. Let me know. Again. And this was with the sandstone, with the green, and this was with that Hartford green. And this was a little adjustment to the Hartford green. So I'm not sure which one's closer. It's probably somewhere between, you know, like the truth. You guys deal in that. This is kind of a nice, if this was the actual colors, this is pretty sweet. But I don't know that that's the color in real appearance. And that is their regular bronze, what I thought was pretty close to it. It's probably a little bit more blue than that. Again, the light and the dark rendering. Now this is their one that's a little darker than sandstone, which is putty, something like that, or natural clay. And that is the end of that for now. I think I have a couple films. There was just a few other things that came up during this editing of this film, and I felt they should be included with it. For one thing, I found a more accurate representation of their ridge cresting in the fleur-de-lis, so I kind of adjusted the model that I had made of that, and I added the actual vents just because we'll need them for any model we use. We're going to have those. So I did that, but also, this is a different kind of a development. It is the one without automatic, but then once it's in here, I auto-correct it. So if this is a more preferable, and I'll show you a few more of these so that you'll be able to tell maybe and have a preference or a consensus. But this is the thing, yeah, these are that same final improvements on that structure with those colors we've been working with. And then this was these were all the improved, not the improved, but the auto-corrected in the picture manager, and this was before auto-correction. So I would think that that's preferable, but let me know. In any event, when I was taking these photographs, I noticed this patio, and if you recall in the first film, I had arbitrarily cut this here because the deck had stepped down there. As we developed it, we found out that the deck was going to be all one level out here. So I'm not sure that we're going to get into cutting that wall anyway and rebuilding it another section across here. So I'm not sure whether it's just better just to put this out here. Now notice I'm showing a structure over it because that's what brought it to my mind, that you could continue some sort of structure over here. It doesn't have to be enclosed, but for rain cover. I don't know how any of that impacts a greenhouse performance, or whether it was even something to be considered. But covering aside, this wall change, probably this makes more sense regardless. It's probably less expensive than to do this whole bit here. And that would all, in the event that this was covered, that would all stay one level. If it were not covered, then that would slope down to this and down. And then I went ahead, because it was so easy, to model this in case it was something that wanted to be considered. And these are just a turnaround of that. And the same turnaround when I auto-correct these. So let me know. And I believe that is it for now. I will do my best to cut it short.